Hi, this is Daryl, and this is Board Gems. And this week, I'm going to cover Raw the Dice Game. It was designed by Reiner Knizia and was published by Rio Grande and Abacus in English and German, respectively. I think it was a joint production. I'm not sure if there was a lead on that. Anyway, joint production. It's for 2 to 4 players, ages 10 and up, according to the box. I think it's a bit of an overestimate. The thing is, it's a really light, simple game, but it's also confusing in parts. So if I had to pick, I'd probably say 9 and up, so close enough. It takes about 30 to 45 minutes to play. This is possibly my favorite dice game. I already know it's going to be hard to put into words why I like it, but I'm going to do my best. But first, I'm going to show you how it plays. And then afterwards, I'm going to try to put into words why I think it's a board gem. To set up the game, place the board in the middle of the table. Each player gets all the cubes of one color. Each player is going to take one of their cubes and place them at the start of each of these 2 areas on these little symbols here. Actually, the rule book shows them starting on these spaces, but I've read on Board Game Geek that that is incorrect, and that this is the better way to do it. And determine the start player. Every player is going to, the way we're going to do it here is I'm just going to pull out a random one. So green's going to go first. The start player is going to go on the 10 space on the scoring track, and then all the other players in clockwise order are going to go 1 space ahead. And finally, this is the raw pawn. This is going to be starting on the sun track on a space equal to the number of players. So we've got 2, 3, and 4. I set it up for a 3-player game, so I'm going to put the pawn here. We're going to play 3 rounds. At the end of 3 rounds, the player who has the highest score on the score track wins. You mostly get points in these 4 areas of the board. This is called the Faro track. These markers are going to be moving up on this Faro track, and at the end of each round, the player who's farthest ahead will gain points. Player who's furthest behind will lose points. Everybody in the middle won't gain or lose any. The markers will also be moving up on this track, the Nile track, but in and of themselves, they won't score any points. Instead, in game terminology, they have to be flooded. That is, to be doubled up, have a second cube on them. Then, at the end of the round, they will score a number of points equal to the space they're on. This is a 6. It will score 6 points. But it has to be flooded, or doubled up, every round. Because at the end of the round, these extra ones come off. This is the civilization area. At the end of the round, any player who doesn't have any cubes in here is going to lose points. And if a player has 3, 4, or 5 cubes in the area, they're going to score 5, 10, or 15 points, quite a few points. And this is the monument area. This will score points, but only at the end of the game, only after the 3rd round. You're going to score points for having 3 or more cubes in a column, and for being in as many columns as possible. Those are the main ways of scoring points in this game. This track, the sun track, controls the length of the round. When the raw pawn moves to the end here, the round is over and we score. In these 5 areas of the board, each of those has a symbol on the die. All these dice are identical except for their color, but they all have the same number of sides. So you can see the different symbols here matching this. And this one, I know you have a hard time seeing it because it's white on yellow, but this is the sun symbol, which corresponds to these sun symbols on this track here. So the start player obviously is going to go first. That's why they're the start player, and then play is clockwise from there. Now on your turn, you're going to take all 5 dice and you're going to roll them. I'm going to roll on the board. Don't actually do this. Over the course of the game, there's going to be lots of cubes on the board, so don't roll them on the board. But you're going to roll all the dice. Now, any dice with a sun symbol are set aside. They're actually locked. And they're placed on the first empty spaces in front of the raw pawn. You can't do anything with these. These are locked. But these, you can choose whether to keep some or re-roll others. If you're happy with the roll, you don't have to re-roll any. Or you can set some aside and re-roll others. And if you're unhappy, you can re-roll. You can change your mind, re-roll different ones, totally up to you, but you have 3 rolls total. Again, every time you roll a sun symbol, it's going to be up here and locked. And after a maximum of 3 rolls, based on the symbols shown on the dice, you get to advance or do something on some of these areas of the board. So let's talk about them. This is the Pharaoh symbol. For every Pharaoh symbol you roll, you get to move your marker one space on the Pharaoh track. So if you roll multiple, you'll get to move multiple spaces. This is the Nile symbol. For every Nile symbol you roll, you get to, again, just like the Pharaoh, move your marker one space on the track. However, if you're able to roll 3 Nile symbols, you can move forward 3 spaces, or instead, you can double up on a marker. And once you're doubled up, that'll be there until the end of the round, or until there's a disaster. We'll talk about disasters later. And while that's there, that stays on there. So even in later turns in the same round, if you roll these symbols again, one symbol will allow you to move the whole thing up one space at a time. And as I mentioned earlier, at the end of the round, any markers that are doubled up like this are going to score points. The civilization symbol is for this area here, the civilization area. Each of these spaces can have at most 1 cube per player, but no space can have cubes from all players. That's not allowed. In order to place any cubes in this area, you have to roll at least 3 civilization symbols. Then you get to place a marker on one of the spaces matching the color shown on the dice. If you already had a marker in the yellow, for example, you would not be able to place a second marker, because no space can have 2 cubes of the same color. But with this roll, you could add 1 to the purple or 1 to the blue. You can add more on your turn, but it means you have to roll additional symbols. 4 civilization symbols allow you to add 2 cubes, and 5 civilization symbols allow you to add 3. Finally, there's the monument area. If you roll a single pyramid symbol, that allows you to place 1 marker in any empty space matching the color of the die. Each of these spaces can only have 1 cube of any color. In order to place more on your turn, you need to roll multiple pyramids. Similar to this, except 1 pyramid allows you to place 1 cube, 3 pyramids allows you to place 2, and 5 pyramids allows you to place 3. If you roll 3, for example, you get to place 2, and again, they have to be on the same colors as rolled on the dice. You would not be able to place on yellow and purple with this roll. So you could place on a blue and a red. Now the first cube you place on your turn can be in any empty space matching a color. But for the second and third cube, if you place them, there's an extra restriction. You can't place it in a column that you already have a cube in. So if you already had a cube in this column, your second cube would not be allowed to be placed here or here, because you already have a cube here. And you wouldn't be allowed to place here or here because you just placed that. So again, it would have to be in a fresh column, a brand new column you don't have any markers in. Now another symbol is the Ankh, or Ankh. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm going to show a second one because it doesn't come out very well. Here we go. This acts as sort of a wild, but it always has to be paired up or combined with the actual symbol. I can't just take an Ankh and move forward on the Pharaoh track, unless I've rolled a Pharaoh. If I've rolled a Pharaoh, I could add an Ankh to it, or Ankh, and move 2 spaces. This is particularly helpful in the Nile when you're trying to roll 3 of a symbol. So you don't need 3 Nile symbols. You could use 2 in an Ankh, or 1 and 2 Ankhs. They're particularly helpful in the civilization area and the monument area because the threshold for adding cubes is so high. You need at least 3 to even add 1 cube, and that can be hard to roll, but Ankhs allow you to add more. So this is equivalent to rolling 4 civilization symbols, which would allow you to add 2 cubes. However, you can only add cubes here and here in the colors you actually rolled the symbol for. So while you have 4 symbols, which allows you to place 2 cubes, you can only place them with this roll on the blue and the red. You would not be allowed to place in the green or the purple because you didn't actually roll that symbol. These basically just help you meet the threshold that allows you to add more cubes. If you can't use the onks for anything, if you have 2 of them, you can just use them for nothing else and just score 2 points. Finally, there's the sun symbol. As I said, any sun that you roll gets placed in the first empty space in front of the raw pawn. And if you roll 1 or 2, then at the end of your turn, the raw pawn is going to move forward that many spaces. So in this case, it would move 2. That happens at the end of your turn. If you roll 3, however, instead of moving the raw pawn, you score 3 points. So if you have 2 already, it can be worthwhile to try and roll a 3rd sun symbol. It allows you to score points, but also maybe you don't want the round to end too quickly, so it keeps this from moving. If you roll 4 or 5 sun symbols, however, that's a disaster. You don't score 3 points, but you also don't get to move this pawn. Instead, every other player is hurt. The player who rolls 4 or 5 sun symbols chooses any one of the 4 areas on the board and causes a disaster there, which hurts every player other than themselves. If they choose the Pharaoh track, every player in that track is going to move back 2 spaces other than them. In the Nile track, anybody who's flooded, who's doubled up, has to remove their flood marker, their extra token. And if they haven't flooded, then they would move back 2 instead. If they pick the civilization, every player other than them has to remove 2 cubes of their choice, and same for the monument area. Remove 2 cubes of your choice. And again, the raw pawn does not move. So play proceeds clockwise, and the round will continue in this fashion until the raw pawn reaches the end of the sun track. Dusk, I suppose. That happens on a player's turn. That player still finishes their turn, and then we score. If it's the first or second round, we score these 3 areas only. There's a player aid, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, which explains the scoring. For the Pharaoh track, whoever is in the lead will score 5 points, but then has to move backwards 2 spaces on the track. Whoever's in last place has to move back 2 spaces on the score track, but moves forward 1. So it bunches everybody up. If players are tied, all the tied players do the same thing. And in the case of the Nile, any player who has doubled up will score points. So if we look at something like this, blue will score 3 points, green will score 6 points. Red won't score anything. Even though red is so far in front, red did not flood, did not add the second marker. So she's not going to score any points for this round. But next round, she may try to do so. And when she does, she'll be able to score 9 points. And after you score, then these extra markers are removed. That has to be redone every round if you want to score. Now we look at the civilization area. Let me throw in a few cubes in here. Something like this. Nobody loses any points because everybody has at least 1 cube in there. If somebody didn't have any, they would lose 5 points. Green and red both have 1 or 2, which means they don't score or lose any points. Blue has 3 cubes, so will score 5 points. If blue had 4 cubes, he would score 10, and if he had 5 cubes, he'd score 15. And at the end of the round, these all get removed from the board. It has to be redone every round. Assuming there's a second or third round, then this gets reset, and play just continues clockwise from the next player. So whoever's had the last turn, they pass the dice to the next player clockwise from them. And at the end of the third round, you score this area, the monuments area, as well as these. So every column you have at least 1 cube in, you're going to score 1 point. But if you're in 7 columns, instead you score 10, and if you're in all 8 columns, you score 15. And any column in which you have at least 3 markers in, you're going to score 5 points, 4 markers, 10 points, and 5 markers, 15. And that's it. The player with the highest score wins. You're ready to play Raw the Dice Game. So this is the part where I explain why I think it's a board gem. And I admit, for Raw the Dice Game, that's going to be hard for me to put into words. There aren't individual parts of it that I, in particular, think, oh, that's brilliant. But just everything works really nicely together. It's almost, to me, the perfect dice game, because it has all these elements that all work together really nicely. You have the 4 different areas of the board that you're working on trying to score points. You can't focus on just one thing. You want to spread the love around a little bit, work toward many different things, because there's lots of points on the table. If you ignore the Nile track or you ignore the monuments, other people are going to score tons of points and you're not. So there's a lot of things to worry about. But at the same time, you're limited on what you can do on your turn, right? Just based on the dice you roll. You don't have 30 options and you're trying to decide what's the best option of all of them. You're limited by the dice. But you have control, obviously. It's a dice game, and you get to re-roll the dice Yahtzee style. It's like, okay, well, I already have a lead in the Pharaoh track, and I roll some Pharaohs. I'm not going to focus on the Pharaohs. I'm going to re-roll those ones. But then re-rolling introduces the risk you're going to lose dice to the suns, to the sun track. But then you have a little bit of a push your luck aspect, because, well, I want to re-roll because I want to get more of this symbol, but I'm risking getting suns. And if I already have 2 suns, then maybe I should keep re-rolling and try to get a 3rd sun, because a 3rd sun will score me points. And I like the variable round length that the players have some control over, but not necessarily fully. But one thing I want to say about this game is that it's in kind of a weird in-between for 2 reasons. One is it's a light game, but it's a little bit confusing in terms of the different areas and how they work. Nothing that a hobbyist would have a problem with, but it's not my first choice for a game that I would introduce to people who are brand new to the hobby, even though it's a light game. It's a light game for hobbyists, if that makes sense. And in that sense, it's in my wheelhouse, but again, that's not for everyone. So if you're looking to introduce a game to your non-gamer friends, this might not be the best choice. Because it has these confusing aspects in some of the areas. Like, it's easy to forget the limitations on how the Ankhs work, or Ankhs, or how the monument area works, or how the civilization area works. Even the Nile area, some of it can be a little bit confusing. And to be honest, it is the dice game version of a pretty famous board game in the hobby, Raw. But I don't feel like that connection, that relationship, does the game any favors, because it's similar to Raw in the setting and the theme and the different scoring areas, but it doesn't have the part of Raw that a lot of Raw fans really like, which are the interesting auctions. There's no auctions in this game, which I'm fine with. I'm actually not the biggest fan of Raw. I think it's fine. But people who love Raw, they might think, oh, it doesn't have the part that I love about Raw the most, which is the auctions. Although it does have kind of the most annoying part of Raw, which is the weird, complicated scoring. So it's almost like it has the worst parts of Raw, not the best, for those people. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of Raw. It's fine. I'm not dissing it. But Raw the dice game does not get favors. I'm not saying this well. Raw the dice game doesn't benefit from that comparison. Obviously, it's banking on the name of its more famous cousin, but fans of that game aren't necessarily going to like this one. But I'm coming in, I'm looking at Raw the dice game as a really nice, simple, fast dice game that just hits all the marks for me. It's almost, for me, the perfect dice game. I can't think of almost anything wrong with this game or anything that's literally bad about it, with the exception of the yellow dice with the white markings. That's a little annoying, but it's not a big deal. So that's my thoughts. I don't quite know any other way to put it, and I know that's not the best review, but I hope I at least showed you some reasons why some people might not like the game. But I did my best to also say why I like it, or why some people might like it, why I consider it a board gem. I will say before signing off that this game is actually a little bit hard to find now. If you're trying to get a used copy, you'll probably have to pay or trade a lot in value in order to get it. It's a little bit hard to find now, and it's got some value to it. Hang on, because a lot of the Knizia games, they do get recycled. You do see them again in 5 years, 10 years. And this is a good enough game that I don't have much doubt that it will be reprinted someday. So keep an eye out for it. Ra the Dice Game is my board gem of the week. Thanks for watching, and hopefully see you next week.